Hi, scholars. Welcome to our second history lesson of the school year. Lesson number 2. Our objectives for today. So, what we are going to learn about and accomplish in our work today, we will learn about the Spice Islands, and we will examine the spice trade route and discuss who had a monopoly on the trade route. Two very important things as we get going on our study of exploration and colonization. People who lived in Europe during the Middle Ages really wanted spices for their foods. It was a way to make the food last a bit longer and taste better. In the Middle Ages, spices were much harder to get than they are today. Right? They couldn't just run to the grocery store, zip over to Target, get spices, and come back to make their meals. At that time, spices like nutmeg, pepper, cinnamon, ginger, and cloves were grown in Asia, and Europeans had trouble getting them. So if you look at that map, right, that area between India and Australia, right, that area is where, at the time, it was called the Spice Islands, where you could get those spices I named. Since the equator runs right through the middle of that archipelago, that chain of islands, the temperatures are warm and there's a good amount of rainfall. The heat and heavy rainfall make for rich soil, which is perfect for growing the spice crops like nutmeg, pepper, cinnamon, ginger, and cloves. Since they loved these spices and were so desperate to have them, you might be wondering why the Europeans didn't just go get the spices themselves from the Spice Islands. Why not just sail over to the Spice Islands and buy them? Well, third graders, it wasn't that simple. And there's three big important reasons why. And you'll want to listen to these and make sure you remember them. First, they didn't know you could sail around Africa. They didn't know it was possible to go around that southern tip. It was still believed by most common people at that time that the earth was flat. That meant if you sailed to the south to go around Africa, they thought you would simply fall right off the earth. Now, by this time of the 1400s, educated people were starting to figure out this was not true, but common people of the time were really still worried that the earth was flat and you would fall right off if you went to the edge. So that's one big reason they did not go to the Spice Islands. That itself is enough to stop people from trying to go. I mean, who would want to fall off the earth? But even if they dared to try it, they didn't know where to go. For many years, the location of the Spice Islands was a very closely held secret. Right? The Arab traders held onto that secret. They didn't want anyone to know where the islands were. They managed to keep the location secret by making up stories about how dangerous it was to sail to the islands. They told stories of the spice crops being guarded by fantastic monsters and hideous flesh eating birds. Here's a drawing, right, of some early maps that had, right, you can see those hideous monsters. Right? Here's another look, flesh eating birds. So, all those things would certainly be enough to keep me from trying to get there. Fear of falling off the earth, not knowing where the Spice Islands actually were. So, how do you go to a place you don't know where it is? And Monsters and flesh eating birds? No thanks. I will just stay in Europe and buy my spices from the merchants there. All of these things meant that the Arab traders had a monopoly on the spice trade. A monopoly means that you have complete control of selling a product or service. They kept this monopoly for hundreds of years, from around 1100 CE to 1400 CE. So they were able to do this because they kept that location secret. And they scared off anyone who was even thinking about possibly trying to go there or trying to find it. The Arab traders sold the spices to the Venetian merchants at high prices so that they could make lots of money from the spices. Then the Venetian merchants sold the spices to the Europeans at even higher prices to make money from buying the spices from the Arab traders. Does that make sense? It can be a bit confusing. Take a look at the next slide with me and let's see if that helps. So the Arab traders were getting the spices from the Spice Islands, right? So they're spending some money, right? You can see the single dollar sign there. So they're spending some money, right? Getting those spices, transporting them by ship to Venice, right? Where the Venetian merchants are. So that moves us to that second level of this table. So the Arabs are selling it for an amount of money to the merchants in Venice, right? The Venetians. They, of course, have to spend a little more money to buy it from the Arab traders because, of course, the Arab traders are going to raise the price because they want to cover the price that they spent plus make some more money. So that's the $3 signs. Then, after they buy it, the Venetian merchants think, now we spent right some money to get these from the Arab traders. So now when we sell it around Europe, we want to make more money as well. So we have to cover the cost we spent. If they sell it for those $3 signs, they're not making any money. So they, of course, raise the price. And then the people of Europe who are buying the spices from the Venetian merchants are spending even more money to get that or those spices from the Venetians. So the price just continues to go up. But then things started to change. Marco Polo and a cellmate, who was a cellmate of his in jail, created a book. The book led map makers to add some places to their maps. Can you guess what one of those places was? Yep, the Spice Islands. Once they had a sense of where the Spice Islands were, it drew in explorers, adventurers, and dreamers like a magnet. On their way to the Spice Islands, these explorers found lands, oceans, and people that they never knew existed. And that, scholars, is a huge focus on our work together in this unit. So you're hearing today all about the Spice Islands. So we learned today about the Spice Islands. We examined that spice trade route and discussed who had a monopoly on the trade route. And remember, it was the Arab traders who had that monopoly. So, for review, scholars, open the attached Google form to answer the questions about today's lessons. You may look back at today's lesson for help. Remember to click submit. Good luck, and thanks for joining me today.